Well, welcome to the Focused Fundraiser, where we discuss how to focus on the right practices in fundraising, because doing more shouldn't be the goal for any of us. Doing what matters most should be, because we don't have enough time in each day to do everything. So the goal of this time is to hear from successful fundraisers who are in the trenches and who are willing to share their best practices that they use on a daily basis. Today, I am joined by Carrie Grover. Carrie, you are the Executive Director of Tracy Community Connection Center, or do you guys use TCCC a lot, I would assume?
Yes, or TCCC is my favorite.
TCCC, I like that. Carrie, thank you so much for joining. Let's dive into your background. Tell me a bit about how you got into the nonprofit sector and fundraising, and you transitioned, I believe, to more of a leadership role. Tell me a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, so I had kind of a unique career trajectory in that I was a stay-at-home mom for a really long time. When my kids were all finally in school, I started volunteering at a local food bank because I had a little time on my hands and I was trying to decide what to do about getting back into the workforce. Long story short, I ended up working my way up to being the executive director at the food bank. Loved it there, and then have just sort of had a journey with a couple other nonprofits. I ran a children's museum for a little bit, and now we focus on low-income and homeless families and individuals, providing street outreach, free showers, free laundry, rental assistance, and eviction prevention. And yeah, I just love what I do. I have great staff, love our mission, love our purpose, and really feel like we move the needle in our community. So I
Hmm.
love it.
What was it like to get into the fundraising world? Was it hard? Did you enjoy the fundraising aspect of it? Tell me a little bit about that side of it.
No, I wouldn't say fundraising is like my favorite part of my job. Uh, but, it's a known quantity and I have to do it. And I do like the relationship aspect of it and some of the creativity aspect of it. I actually love making things on Canva and putting together the flyers and I have a degree in English, so I think I have some decent writing skills. Um, so I do like some of those pieces of it.
Awesome. We'll skip past the Oxford comma then and the M dash arguments that's happening with AI if you're an English major.
Okay.
So,
So many M
uh,
dashes in AI.
yeah. As you learned fundraising and as you kind of moved into that position, were there assumptions that you had set in your mind if you look back to starting fundraising and kind of learning from your mistakes, as we all do as we start something new? Was there assumptions that you had held that you had to let go of in the fundraising and being like, oh, this is not a good way to fundraise, and this is a good way to fundraise?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that in some ways you have to not be afraid to ask people for money. I mean, they know you run a nonprofit. And so I used to be a little more afraid to just say, and now I will just go up to a business owner and I will say, hey, what are you doing to contribute to the nonprofits in our community? What is and if the worst they can say is, oh, I contribute elsewhere, or we don't do it, or whatever. But I've learned to stop being afraid to just point blank ask people. Um, I'll even say, hey, I know you support Boys and Girls Club. Are you interested in supporting my organization as well? And so I think I have just had to let go of the fear of that awkwardness of asking for money and just push past that. Um, I think too, letting go of the idea that there's a perfect way to ask for money, to do a campaign or anything like that, and just done is better than perfect. I think I have really embraced the mantra of like B minus work has got to be okay sometimes, because you could revise and redo a million times, but it's better to just send it out and get it going rather than make it perfect.
Yeah. We like to say, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. You got to
Yeah,
ship
all
it
the time.
sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
You transitioned into a leadership role at Triple C. Is that correct?
Mhm.
What was that like for you? For those that are listening, that it might be fundraisers or they might be transitioning themselves and wanting to hear advice from somebody that's been through it themselves. What was it like to go from a fundraising role into more of a leadership role?
Well, I kind of hold both still.
Sure.
So as the executive director, in the way that our company is structured, I am really the only administrative staff. I mean, I have a little bit of support here and there, but most everyone on staff is programmatic. And so I have sort of my contracted help, but I sort of hold a lot of hats, which I'm sure is the case for a lot of executive directors in small nonprofits. I don't have a director of development. I don't have a lot of support that way. And so I think the biggest thing is just sort of embracing the fact that you can only do so much. Um, and also learning to rely on your board a little bit more. I think boards tend to abdicate a lot in terms of actual responsibility, but helping teach your board, like, hey, I'm going to run the day-to-day show here, but I need your support in fundraising. And at a board meeting in January, I said, look, we have a $17,000 budget deficit, and your job is to help me fill that $17,000. And divided by 9 of you, that's going to be X number of dollars, and I was like really specific with the board about their responsibility and the numbers that I was expecting from them. Have we gotten there? No, we have not. But I think that's one thing I would say is to really lean on the board in the way that they really are set up to be your fundraising support.
That's super good. Do you have advice on activating your board as far as we as human beings, if we're shown the path, we often will take the path, but if we're not shown it, we don't know even what's needed of us. And so I hear this a lot on the board side, that how do I activate the board? Do you have advice on that?
I don't have any perfect answers, but I have done some training. I brought in a consultant who did a couple sessions with the board, just explaining to them their roles and responsibilities, because a lot of people don't even know. And we've reviewed, redid some board contracts. I met with them one-on-one, talked about my expectations. And then the biggest thing is just getting rid of people who aren't doing their job. I mean, I had a board president who literally was missing meetings, didn't follow up with me on anything. And I just had a frank conversation with him, like, hey, I understand. He had a lot of stuff going on in his life. Like, if it's not the time for you to be on the board, totally fine, but you need to step down. And he did. But those hard conversations of like replacing people who aren't effective on your board have to be done.
Yeah, that's super good advice. Those are the hard conversations, but they're the ones that can exponentially grow when you're getting rid of the 20% that isn't working and focusing in on the other part.
Yeah.
So when your team, if I'm correct, you guys, you've moved from expanding from several hundred people to serving over 1,000 people a year, if I looked at this correctly, correct? So your organization has
Yeah.
grown. I would
Yes.
assume that you added in programs and initiatives throughout all that. How do you, from a focused standpoint, how do you focus on what's priority each week? Because and I guess maybe even a better question is, how have you, what has been some success in your fundraising to be able to support that growth?
Yeah. So I've really just tried to make sure that we stick to mission, staying focused on the mission. So in some ways, we've really exponentially grown, and in other ways, we've cut off. So when I got into the organization, we were running a women's shelter. It was an 8-bed shelter, which, of course, it's wonderful to provide, but it was a disaster on all fronts. It was bleeding money. I didn't have adequate staff time over there, nor the ability to hire somebody to run it. And so I made the hard decision to let that program go. Once our lease was up, we dropped that program, and I cannot tell you how much help that has been. I mean, it's sad that that's gone, because it was a nice place to put people who needed a home, but we were able to bring back the staff time into things that really were making more of a difference. And so we've really tried to focus our energy right now on our rental assistance program, which is like our cash cow in terms of our contracts with insurance companies who are helping pay for some of that. And so I really wanted to focus on what are we doing well, and let's do that, as opposed to doing so many things and not doing this one really well. So some of that, like deciding to let stuff go, is hard, but that has been really helpful. And then I'd say it dovetails with that in terms of the fundraising, is really focus on what's working. Um, I try to diversify, right? So we have some contracts, we have some grant funding, we have some just straight donation dollars. And so really leaning into what is being successful and working on that more. And we've really seen some great outcomes there. Also, hiring a great grant writer has been helpful. She's just been worth her weight in gold for what I pay for her. Um, so yeah, that's some of what we've been doing.
I would probably be remiss if I didn't ask about the political side of things that's happening right now. Let's not get into the politics, but on the grant side of things, since you brought up grants, how has that affected you guys? And have you had to pivot at all in some of the funds that might have been coming from government grants?
We have, yeah, we lost some direct federal dollars from the emergency food and shelter program. And just going forward, I know some of the dollars that we apply for, we've had to kind of tweak a little bit. They're focusing less on outreach and encampments, especially in California. And so, yes, we're having to pivot to how can we apply for dollars. Maybe it's the same program, but we're wordsmithing it a little bit to make sure that we meet the qualifications of those grants. And really, we're not going after a lot of federal dollars at the moment, just because that landscape is so uneasy and difficult to manage. So it has been
Have you
tough, I will say.
have you had to supplement with more philanthropic donor, like going after private donors?
Yeah. Yeah. So we've focused on some local foundations, which have been great. And sometimes they're small, $2,000 to $5,000, but it does add up. We kind of, doing whatever we can, casting the net wide.
Yeah. All right. Let's pivot into some tactical. I've got a question for you, and I'm not fishing for. I know you're a Donor Doc user, so I'm not fishing for Donor Doc. But on a practical note, what's a tool or a ritual that you and your team use to avoid burnout and to focus and to keep priorities moving forward rather than getting lost in the other pieces that you potentially could be doing, but how do you focus in? What's a tool or a method that you would recommend?
So I'm big into time blocking. I like to have my calendar set before I leave work that day. I have my next day's calendar time blocked, and I will mark out, of course, my appointments or whatever. But if there's a project I need to have some focus time on or whatever, I'll have that time blocked out. So that's one tool that I really like. I really encourage my staff, and I'm the same way, that if something is not working, we reevaluate and pivot. So I am not one of those people who say, this is how we've always done it, we have to do it. I'm like, no, if there's a better system. And so for better or for worse, we're constantly reevaluating. Like, for example, we were using all these different Google Drive spreadsheets to track insurance and blah, blah, blah. And it was just all these different spots for my case managers to track stuff. And we finally bit the bullet and purchased an electronic client records tool. And it was expensive, and the training was arduous, and we're still in the middle of that. But it has eliminated, I feel like, so many other steps to just have for this one tool that everybody's in communicating, we can schedule. And so just really trying to optimizing the use of time and those tools. In terms of avoiding burnout, I really try to encourage work-life balance for my I try to model that for my staff. I'm very protective of my time with my family, and I encourage them to do the same. So
Mm,
hopefully
yeah.
that's working. But
Modeling it is huge from a leadership standpoint. It's the top-down effects of our culture of what we do.
yes.
So that's huge. Yeah. All right. So last question for you, Carrie. Fundraisers, they often feel stretched thin and overwhelmed and maybe scrambling to focus. What would be a piece of advice that you would give a fellow fundraiser if you were having coffee with them and they were saying that they were feeling overwhelmed?
I would just say do your best to really focus on relationships over transactions. How can you build a relationship today? And I really have had a lot of success. I mean, it takes that time, but just being present at events, making a point to invite people to coffee or to lunch or to whatever those ever else makes sense, even if it's not necessarily somebody in my field but just having those community connections have really benefited me in the long term. And it doesn't always turn into somebody who wants to donate, but sometimes it does. Sometimes they want to volunteer. I've gotten board members that way. And so just that relationship piece, if you can really just focus on how can I build a relationship with this person today, as opposed to like, I hope they give me money. I think that is the best piece of advice that I could give.
That's super good advice. Carrie, thank you so much. This was great. I appreciate you giving your advice and your experience. I think we talked about some good pieces here, and I hope that those listening found some encouragement of focusing in on what matters most. So, Carrie, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, as always, if you want to be on the Focused Fundraiser podcast, shoot me a message on LinkedIn and we'll get you on so you can share your advice as well. And we will see you next week.